So could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Gerry Roston, and obviously we're in Southeast Michigan.
Yeah, that's very good, Gerry. Can you tell people a little bit about your background and what you've done for a living?
Okay, sure. By background, technically, I'm a doctor of robotics. I got my PhD back in the early 90s. And before that,
As you can see, proof.
Hey, you want me to tell you about a couple of the projects I did earlier on?
Please,
Okay.
yeah.
So the one which most people will hopefully recognize both. Have you ever heard of NASA Sojourner, the first rover that NASA put on Mars
Of course.
in the early 90s?
Yes.
I'm the guy who designed and built the robot that all the software for that one was developed on.
I didn't know this.
Yeah, this one I worked at the Jet Propulsion Lab. Yeah. The other project I did there, I'll make this a really short story. I'll leave out all the leading up to it, but I actually am the guy who reconfigured and calibrated the first robot that was ever used for robotic surgery.
Oh, is that all? What? Holy moly.
Yeah. So early in my career, I was pure tech geek, doing technical stuff like that
Okay.
and enjoying it. But then I had the pleasure of meeting my wife, and I actually learned that there's something in the world called people.
What?
Yeah.
Tell me more about this.
And what I've been doing for the last couple of decades is I've been running technology-focused startups. One of them was additives for plastics. The other was something called Industrial Internet of Things. You've probably heard of IoT.
Yeah.
But the other thing I've been doing, which I've really been enjoying, is coaching, mentoring, and teaching people your age generally who want to start tech startups about how to go into the market and learn if their idea makes sense and how to improve their thinking and hopefully how to make their business a success.
Could you give us a few examples of the kind of startups you were involved in or the kind of work they were doing?
Well, I mean, I've coached several hundred people, so I can't remember everything. But one
Sure.
fellow, he's got a product. I don't remember what it's called, but if you wear an Apple Watch, it has to do with swimming. It has to do with tracking, and he's won some awards for that. Another couple was doing a project to try to help companies learn about their new employees to try to retain them longer.
Ooh.
A bunch of things, all over the map, but they all had a technology component. And what made it a lot of fun was the excitement in these people and their desire to really do something. And that was a lot of fun.
Wow. That's incredible, and I really appreciate you sharing that with us.
Most recently, last semester, I worked at Lawrence Tech University,
Okay.
and it didn't quite work out. So, I'm trying to get back more into that sort of consulting role. And I guess the big difference is that the programs I ran before, the people were there because they wanted to be there.
Yeah.
At Lawrence Tech, the class I taught was a required class, and the students didn't necessarily want to be there.
Oh, it's a totally different dynamic.
And it's a different dynamic, and it just wasn't as much fun.
Okay. All right. So you're looking for the next big adventure.
Yeah.
The next groundwork for perhaps our next greatest robotic invention. It's still to come.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of friends have, thrown some options for me, CEOs of various startups, and I'm
Yeah.
looking at some of those. But
Okay.
like I said, it's more fun to, and I know, if anybody knows me, they're going to find it really hard to believe that I'm saying this, but it's more fun to interact with people and, learn what's going on and try to help them.
Yeah. Do you mind me sharing a little bit about what you shared with me over on
Go
your
right
computer?
ahead.
Yeah, so pretty remarkable. I've never really met someone who values and maintains connections and relationships quite the way you do. So he was showing me pictures back from elementary and middle school of individuals, and he can point to them and say, yeah, I actually just had dinner with them 2 weeks ago. I'm going to their daughter's wedding in Malaysia. It's just so evident to me how much you value that human connection and that ability to play an impactful role in others' lives. So I think that really naturally leads us into the next question of what do you view as some of your strengths? I think that's a big one. What else?
Early on, I'd say that my strength was my technology ability, my ability to think and plan and, do stuff like that. My wife and I go out on weekends, and I always have a plan of, where we're going to go, how. I even take notes these days, which surprises me of how to get there. I mean, I've always had a really good sense of direction. total segue. When I was in the Boy Scouts, they came up with a new merit badge called orienteering.
Oh, I would have failed that.
Yeah.
Orienteering, okay.
Yeah, and orienteering was a sport that came out of Scandinavia. Basically, you have a map with some points on it. You have to go around and punch a card. Anyway, I was the first scout, kid, whatever, in my district, whatever, to get that merit badge. So I could always find my way around.
Okay,
So I'm taking
okay.
notes these days, which I find strange, but I'm doing that. But, you know, I'm always very good at planning and figuring out how to do things. And, you know, the other thing which I'm told, which is, again, something new to me, is that I can connect with people, that I can listen to them and help them figure out what they're trying to figure out.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful, beautiful. So other than the obvious passion and joy you get from connecting with others and maintaining those relationships, what are some other things that you really enjoy doing with your time these days?
Well, you know, one thing that I used to really enjoy, truly enjoy, was cooking.
Yes.
But,
I can attest. Good cook.
yeah, but one of the injuries that they suspect I sustained, they can't really measure this or check it. They believe my olfactory nerve got severed. So I haven't really smelled or tasted in years now. If I ever hear somebody say they had that problem with COVID, I go, you're lucky, at least it'll come back.
Right. Right.
But, so, yeah, I still enjoy doing that, but, yeah, I don't get to experience the reward of that work. I also like finding solutions to problems.
Mm-hmm.
You know, again, maybe that's the geek in me, but if it's something that's unsolved and I can solve it, great. And, you know, I also write small programs, you know, computer programs to do stuff around the house. I like doing stuff like that.
You know, that reminds me, when we were working together, I remember you made this program. We were talking about reminders.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was like positive affirmation reminders.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, maybe you can write them on sheets of paper and put them in a jar.
Oh, the gratuity jar.
Yeah,
Yes.
and you said, I think I'd like to make a quick program for it. So every time I log into my computer, I'm prompted. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, do that. You can do that. Do that.
Yeah, I did it. So once I got home, that was one of the first programs I wrote. It's still on my computer. I can
That's
show you
wonderful.
afterwards.
Wow.
Whenever the computer wakes up, because I don't turn it off or anything, I just put it to sleep. But every
Sure.
time it wakes up, it pops up on the screen, like pulling the piece of paper out of the jar.
That's amazing. I love that so much. Well, you know, we've kind of insinuated and alluded a bit to the fact that there was some sort of injury that
Yeah.
happened. Do you mind sharing a little bit
Sure.
about what happened? Yeah.
So, okay, the first thing I gotta say is a joke, if you will, but my PhD's from Carnegie Mellon in Pennsylvania, so I'm allowed to tell this joke. Pennsylvania, for people who don't know, is Philadelphia on the east, Pittsburgh on the west, and Alabama in the middle. So, we were driving back from New York to Michigan, and we've been on I-80 in Pennsylvania dozens of times because, you know, our families are from the East Coast. It was after dark on the 15th of November. It was about 6 o'clock at night or whatever. And my wife was driving the car, and a large male deer, by large I'm told it was more than 300 pounds, tried to jump over the car. It missed and came through the windshield. And the issue is that the impact with the car killed it, but as it was dying, it kicked me in the head at least once.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had some rather severe injuries. And something I just learned is that we got taken to a hospital, which was, you know, luckily nearby. It was a class 1 trauma center, which is, you know, where you have to go if you're seriously injured. And we were there for a month. And the entire time that we were in that hospital, I was in the trauma ICU. So I was pretty severely injured. And then we were at U of M hospital for a month, and then we were at Eisenhower Rehab Center for 4 months. And that's when COVID hit while we were at the center, so that made things fun. And then we've been home, and, you know, I took the next half year to year after that just to keep recovering and try to become a functioning person again.
Absolutely. Do you mind sharing about what you told me that you learned after the fact about a score that you had received? The Glasgow?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the injuries I received is something called traumatic brain injury, which I suspect many of you are familiar with. And when you have a TBI, traumatic brain injury, and you're brought into a hospital, they do something called the Glasgow Coma Scale to see how severe it is. And that scale starts at a 3 and goes to a 15. 15 is normal. I scored a 3. And I learned this, like, okay, bottom of the scale, what does that mean? And I looked at some articles online, and let's just say that the mortality rate for people with a Glasgow Coma Scale score of 3 is generally in excess of 50 to 60%. So it was pretty severe.
Absolutely was. Absolutely. Yeah. Is it okay if I share a little bit about how we met
Yeah,
and our
please.
journey together? Yeah. So.
And we have to take Robin at her word here, because the first time we met, I have no memory of that whatsoever.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Usually I'm a pretty honest person, but no, we actually briefly met in the hospital. I was working in inpatient rehab where Gerry was a patient, and both he and his wife were there. And so I got to work with him a bit. Of course, this was during the period of time where he was having the post-traumatic amnesia, so he doesn't have memory of that. But I shortly thereafter left and started working, like you said, at the Eisenhower Center, where Gerry so happened to discharge and continue on the rehabilitation. So I had this unique opportunity of getting to see him very acutely after, this traumatic accident, all the way until I got to come home and evaluate your home and get you set up for coming back home. And now here we are 2.5 years later, and you're just a different person, right? I didn't know you before the accident. So to be able to have these snippets in your recovery and play a small role has been just something unforgettable, really.
Let me just correct you a little bit. One of the things about therapists, and by that I mean occupational therapists, speech language pathologists, one of the things that I've learned, first of all, these people are fantastic, but one of the things I've learned from them is they tend to, what's the right word, downplay the role that they've had in recovery. And like I said to you earlier, you can work as hard as you want, but if that work is not properly guided, it's wasted effort. And, Rachel just said something Robin just said something.
Rachel, you're right. Rachel.
It's okay. I'm getting Robertson confused.
Yeah, I know.
Rachel just said something, helped a little bit. But the fact is, her skill, her dedication, her experience was able to direct me and my efforts so that I was able to get better. Because without that, who the heck knows where I'd be right now? But almost certainly not here.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you. But I got to tell you, you deserve a lot of the credit too, though, because I work with a fair number of people who don't put in that level of dedication and self-initiation like you did. Every time you'd come to session, you say, I completed my homework and I would like some more, please. Right? He was always taking it the step further and pushing himself. And so I think you can attribute a lot of your recovery kind of to that dedication too, right? There's some luck that's been on your side for sure.
Yeah. Well, the woman who was my science teacher in the 7th and 8th grades, and when I was her student, it was her second year as a teacher, so she's only like 10 years older than I am, and we've become very close friends over the last few decades. When I spoke to her from Eisenhower, she made a comment to the effect of, remember, she's known me since I'm 11 years old, so she knows me.
Goes back.
Yeah. She made a comment to the effect of, this might be the first time in your life when your innate stubbornness is a good thing.
This is a good way to look at that. I appreciate it. Well, Gerry, I'm throwing a curveball at you because this is not a prearranged question I had sent you, but would you mind sharing with us what were some of the things that were challenging for you that weren't challenging before your accident?
A lot of stuff. Back to the injury, basically everything up here was broken. And it turns out that in a human being, I'm assuming other mammals as well, a lot of the nerves in the head go routed through the bone because that's the only place for them, and I had a lot of nerve damage. And so, one of the big challenges initially was just being able to see because my eyes weren't lining up right. And I had a surgery several months after I got out of Eisenhower to correct that, but I couldn't drive for months. I mentioned the issues I'm having with smell and taste. I also had some memory issues. Especially early on, my working memory wasn't working. I still have some issues with my long-term memory, but my working memory is now okay. But that was a real challenge as well. But those are sort of the big things that I recall.
Yeah, that sounds about right too. I think one other that you had mentioned earlier that you would probably agree with was the emotional ability.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the, I don't know what you call it, the outcomes of my TBI was something called emotional liability. And back when I was at Eisenhower, I could barely say a sentence or two without crying.
Mm-hmm.
And it's taken a lot of work to be able to speak without crying. And, occasionally if I'm saying something emotional, that tends to try to happen. So I have to stop, catch my breath, and calm myself down. But that's still a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So what would you, outside of, I know what you'd say about the therapy was certainly helpful. What would you attribute kind of this miraculous recovery to? Are there some things that you can point to as?
Well, I don't know if there's any one particular thing I can point to, but one of the things which has been very helpful is having friends and colleagues who know the situation and who care. So one of the things about the therapists, any therapist, I shouldn't say any therapist, 99.999% of therapists, is that they're not going to know you from before
Right.
you start seeing them. And in my case, with the memory issues, as helpful as the therapists were, they weren't able to say, do you remember when, or do this with it? And so being able to have some of those friends in and have some of those conversations was helpful. But then, of course, COVID hit and all that got shut down.
Right.
But still, those people around were very helpful. And, even when we were in the hospital in Pennsylvania, my sister-in-law and my wife's niece were both there. They came in and, they supervised and whatnot. And again, I have no memory of any of that, but I suspect that also was very helpful. Just to have those people around you who care about you, who can help direct you and see that things are going properly.
Yeah. I really think that the value of community, the value of love, and the value of a sense of normalcy cannot be understated when we're talking about brain injury recovery.
Yeah. I mean, as I used to say, since you don't work, I can say this. What I really liked about Eisenhower were the therapists. I mean, I really thought I got very lucky because the therapists I worked with, I thought were all fantastic. Eisenhower itself wasn't so crazy about. The room was okay, but
Sure.
Who wants to eat dinner at 5 o'clock in the afternoon? Not me. We normally eat at 7. So there were some issues like that. And, just I wanted to get home.
Sure.
And that's part of what drove me. And again, the therapists were very good.
Yeah, absolutely. So another question I had sent to you that I saw you kind of ponder is this idea of kind of stereotypes or misunderstanding of traumatic brain injury in general. Yeah. Have you had a chance to kind of think about that and see if there were any stereotypes that you were up against in your recovery?
Yeah. I mean, one of my colleagues here heard about the accident like within a week when it happened. So she sent an email to hundreds of people just to keep them updated. So a lot of people in the community that I'm associated with know what happened, but I haven't really noticed any issues. I mean, people, they've been nice to me. I suspect they probably were, but nobody said, oh, he's brain injured, he can't do this or that. I haven't noticed that. I don't know what prejudices I have with regard to that. We've seen TV shows where they have somebody who's got, not autism, one where they speak a lot. There are various things that you see on TV. Yeah. And sometimes maybe I'm not sympathetic enough, but, again, I don't think I know anybody like that. But I don't think I've experienced anything directly. I think I've probably been harder on myself than other people have been hard on me.
Wow. That's really, honestly, it's very encouraging to hear, right? That we are kind of in this space and this time that people understand it better and people have a little bit more compassion and empathy for their community. And I think that pulls back into the reason that you have made such a good recovery. It's because of that community, right?
Yeah, I suspect that's a large part of it.
All right, Gerry. So knowing that you have made a pretty miraculous recovery and you're on your way to a sense of new normalcy for you, Are there any things that you're still working on, or goals that you have for yourself moving forward?
Well, one of the things that I'm working on, and again, I don't know if it's my youth or a result of the accident, but I don't think I have quite the stamina that I had previously. Because before the accident, I really might turn off when I hear this craziness. I was doing some work in Grand Rapids, which is like 120 miles from here. I'd drive there in the morning, do my thing, and drive home in the evening. I don't know that I can do that anymore. So I want to work on my stamina, try to get back to the sort of crazy person I once was. Some of the physical stuff like the smell and the taste, nothing I can do about that.
Right.
So, can't cry over spilt milk. And I'm still trying to learn new stuff. I'm just doing some computer stuff, little things, but I'm just trying to learn and keep myself active. And, ideally, I'll get back to work like I had previously where I can help people, and because that's what I'd like to do.
Absolutely. I think you're really close. I think you're right there. You're just the right opportunity now.
Yeah.
More than anything else.
Yeah.
Well, this has been so wonderful, and I'm really appreciative that you took the time to do this. And it's just, like, for me, so personally fulfilling to have been a part of this recovery and this journey, and to see you again on the other side is pretty amazing. So thank you for doing this.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. You killed it!